Today, you will discover 5 real generations of medieval Wallachia, a family that lived between the Christian cross and the Ottoman crescent, and its connection to Count Dracula. This is the story of the Dracula dynasty. Radu I ruled Wallachia at the end of the 14th century, at a time when the principality still struggled to survive between greater powers. He belonged to the Basrab dynasty, founders of the Wallachian state. His reign was not marked by great epic battles, but by something equally important: political stability and institutional strengthening. Radu I supported the Orthodox Church, built monasteries, and laid the foundations for his successors to govern a more cohesive territory. He was immortalized on this small coin, on the obverse in medieval Cyrillic, Radu, the voivode, and in the center, a reset. On the reverse, a square cross, with stars in each corner and dots around it. Radu was a great ruler, but his greatest legacy, however, was his son. That son was Mircea I, the elder, one of the greatest rulers in Wallachian history. Under Mircea, the principality reached its greatest territorial extent. He faced the advance of the Ottoman Empire, negotiated with Hungary, and consolidated Wallachia as a respected regional power. Mircea understood something fundamental: Wallachia's survival depended on political balance, not only on the sword. Among his many sons was one who would inherit a dark and decisive destiny: Vlad II Dracula, the Prince of the Dragon, son of Mircea I, lived in an even more dangerous world. He was admitted into the Order of the Dragon, a Christian order created to contain the Ottomans. The dragon symbol earned him the nickname Dracula, but ruling Wallachia required concessions. To keep his throne, Vlad Dracula agreed to become a vassal of the Ottoman Sultan. As a guarantee of this loyalty, he made an extreme decision. He sent 2 of his sons as hostages to the Ottoman Empire. Those sons were Vlad Téps and Radu the Handsome. The younger became known as Radu the Handsome. At the Ottoman court, Radu adapted quickly. He learned the language, the customs, and gained the trust of the sultans. While his brother hated captivity, Radu turned it into an advantage. Later, he would return to Wallachia as an Ottoman-backed ruler, governing with diplomacy, not terror. Radu represents the conciliatory face of the dynasty, but his brother followed a very different path. Vlad III, later called Téps, the Empaler, never forgot his years as a hostage. When he took the throne, he chose to rule through absolute fear. Traitors, criminals, and enemies were punished by impalement, not only as punishment, but as a political message. Impalement was one of the most feared execution methods of the Middle Ages. The method consisted of driving a long, sharpened wooden stake through the victim's body. The stake was fixed into the ground, and the condemned person was placed on it so that their own body weight caused a slow descent. The goal, in many cases, was not only execution but public terror. For this reason, it was performed in visible places, such as roads, hills, or city entrances, to serve as a warning to enemies and rebels. Depending on how it was carried out, the process could be slow. In some historical records, executioners took care to avoid immediately vital organs, prolonging suffering, and turning the execution into a spectacle of political and military intimidation. Vlad believed order could only be maintained through terror. He defied the Ottoman Sultan himself, refusing tribute and devastating enemy territories. His brutality shocked Europe. From this historical reputation, centuries later, the Dracula myth emerged. Dracula, by Bram Stoker, is one of the most influential works of Gothic horror. Published in 1897, the book presents the Transylvanian vampire Count, who became the definitive symbol of the vampire myth. The story mixes diaries, letters, and reports to create suspense and a sense of realism. More than a monster, Dracula represents fear of the unknown, of the night, and of immortality itself. To this day, he shapes films, series, and pop culture. Bram Stoker was an Irish writer born in 1847 who entered history as the creator of one of horror's most famous characters, Count Dracula. In 1897, he published the novel Dracula, which redefined the vampire myth in literature. Even without being an immediate major success, the book became one of the greatest classics of global horror. A curious fact about Bram Stoker is that, despite creating the most famous vampire of Transylvania, he never visited Romania. The entire setting of Dracula was built from research in books, travel accounts, maps, and historical studies available in British libraries. Stoker used geographic descriptions, Eastern European folklore, and documents about Wallachian rulers to give realism to the story, showing how a remarkable work can arise purely from deep research and imagination. The two castles most associated with the Dracula legend are Bran Castle and Ponari Castle, but each has a very different history. Bran, with its towers and dramatic appearance, became famous in tourism as Dracula's Castle. However, there is no solid proof that Vlad Tépes lived there. At most, he may have passed through the region. The association is far more literary and cultural than historical. Ponari, on the other hand, has a direct connection with Vlad. Built atop a cliff, with hundreds of steps for access, it was a strategic fortress used and expanded by him. In the 15th century, it was a military stronghold, not a palace, designed for defense and surveillance. Today only ruins remain, but the site is considered the castle truly linked to the ruler who inspired the legend. Radu the Handsome and Vlad Téps grew up together, were hostages together, but became opposites. One chose diplomacy and strategic submission, the other chose violence and total resistance. Both, however, were products of the same dynasty begun by Radu I, strengthened by Murcia I, and shaped by the chaos of the 15th century. This is not a story of monsters, it is a real story of power, survival, and extreme choices. If you enjoyed this journey through the real history behind Vlad the Impaler, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments, was Vlad a cruel tyrant or a ruler necessary for his time? See you in the next video.